Hello, guys. Welcome. It's a new day with Stanley and Renee.
Hi, guys.
Hey, I'm Stanley. Of course, you know this is my beautiful wife, Renee.
Hello.
Hope you guys had a great weekend. Look, we got a very, very informative special guest today and also topic. We are talking about music and how it affects us. This is part 2 because it was so extended and so much to it. So much to it. It's a whole lot to it. You know, music is a lot. You know, dealing with different genres of music and also the history of it. So, you know, it's going to take some time. But we got a special guest today, y'all. First, I want to introduce this young man. His name is DRay. He is a great producer. He is one of the I call the dynamic duo of Blast Radio 247. He is our brother, our best friend. Oh man, and now our business partner, one of them. And so we want to bring him in. Mr. DRay, are you there, sir?
Okay, where do I send the check for you calling me a young man? I appreciate it.
Well, you know, you are the same age as my nieces and nephew.
Hey.
Well, you know, you're young.
Tell my knees and my back that. Hey, how y'all doing?
My. You got a long way to go to get there, brother.
Man.
So how you doing, D?
I'm blessed and highly favored. How y'all doing?
Oh, we're doing great, man.
Good.
And we want to basically just tell you thank you, man, for gracing our podcast as our producer. A lot of people don't realize the people behind the curtain, which is Blast Radio 247, and you and Brother Troy are the producers of this great radio digital station, and other brothers and sisters that are under us that are part of it that are magnificent. We're going to go into the questions. I'm not going to prolong it, but we're excited that you're here. Okay. And we're going to ask you a host of questions. My first question is for you, D. Tell us how you actually got your education experience in the music field.
Well, I guess the start, you know, from a young age, just being a music fan. I grew up a fan of Motown records, fan of Stax records, even, you know, as young as 2-3 years old. And it was it was a connection that I had with music that from a very, very young age, it was just like it made sense to me. And I'll never forget, I think I was 8 years old, so that would have been maybe around 1980, 81, somewhere around in there. Okay. I was on the school bus. I went to Northwood Elementary School in High Point, North Carolina.
Okay.
And I lived in Newgate. So Stanley, you know that bus ride. And our bus driver had a boombox this particular day, and there was a song came on the radio called "Stomp" by the Brothers Johnson.
Yeah.
And it was something about that song that, for whatever reason, when it hit my ears, I immediately started to split parts. Wow. I started recognizing backups, background singers. I started recognizing arrangements, and it just made so much sense to me that I just kind of figured, okay, this is probably where I need to be. I was in middle school band. I was in show choir in high school. I was in a music education major briefly in college. I also eventually got my master's business administration with a concentration in music business from Berklee College of Music. And I have been in independent music for 30 years, over 30 years.
Long time.
Wow, that's a long time, dude.
Absolutely.
Wow.
Absolutely. This is the path.
Wow. Yes, sir. Hey, we always ask people that we interview, you know, what are the many hats that you wear on a daily basis? What are the many hats that you wear?
So,
gotta breathe on that one.
Yeah. Musician, songwriter, producer, arranger, computer tech, marketer, social media manager, copywriter, marketing person, visionary, counselor, psychologist. I mean, pretty much you name it. Graphic artist. Pretty much you name it. When you're an independent artist, you have to expect to be able to do it all, you know, until you can hire someone to do it for you.
Right.
And that's one of the things about my journey was I kept being met with obstacles because, you know, I didn't have the budget or I didn't have the team or whatever. And so at every obstacle, I used that as a moment to learn about the business.
Wow.
So instead of having to beg to go into someone's studio, I learned how to build a studio at my house. Instead of begging a record company to give me a shot, I created my own company to give myself a shot. So at every point, I just kind of learned. And so now, not only can I, you know, manage my own career, but I can also help others. You know?
Wow, that's great.
And can I interject something real quick before he moves on? He also has a family. So that's another there's
hat.
A few other hats that he's wearing in addition to what he's doing. You forgot about that, didn't you?
Look, let me tell you something. That is not for the weak. and I waited late in life to start, you know, the family life.
Wow.
So, you know, back in the day, I could have kept up with these kids. Now I got to outthink them because I can't outrun them. So, yeah, you're absolutely right.
Wow. Man, we'll be praying.
That's pretty good.
We'll be praying for you, brother. That's a lot of hats there.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
My next question is for you, D. What artists have influenced your music career? What artists? I know there's probably several.
And you know, sometimes it just kind of really depends on the day. But if you're talking about the actual foundation, I have to start with Quincy Jones.
Wow.
Because Quincy Jones produced the Brothers Johnson. I found that out when I listened to Stomp.
Yeah.
And while I wasn't caught up in the big Michael Jackson craze, after the fact, I started really analyzing how they put an album together, how they put songs together. Quincy Jones would be the foundation. 2 would probably be this electronic band from London called The Art of Noise.
Okay.
And Ann Dudley was one of the main musicians in that band, and Trevor Horn was the producer of that band. And they produced a lot of instrumentals and a lot of things that musically spoke to me. So Art of Noise, and then of course Jimmy Jam and Terry Lewis. Anything they did in the 80s, I listened to, and I listened to very, very loud.
Oh, good. Wow. So are you a Herbie Hancock fan?
I am a Herbie Hancock fan, but I'm a Herbie Hancock fan from the late 60s, early 70s when he was with the jazz group called the Headhunters. A lot of samples that Jay Dilla, hip hop producer, he used a lot of those samples, and you know me, I have to go and find where you got that sample from. So definite fan of Herbie Hancock, and of course everybody in my neighborhood listened to Rocket when it came out. So yeah. So no doubt.
So next question: Who are the artists that you consider legends?
Stevie Wonder is a legend.
Oh yeah.
And I probably should have included him in the foundation because my mom wouldn't let me listen to his records until I did my homework back in the day. So Stevie Wonder is a legend. Prince was a legend. Michael was a legend. Whitney, legend.
Yes.
Aretha, legend. And for me, you don't want to overuse the word, but
right.
Anytime that you have a span of work, a body of work that can span decades, and still be relevant, to me, you're a legend in my book. So,
because I think of Tina Turner is one too. You know, so many years that she was able to maintain in the field. So,
absolutely, and Tina Turner might be pushing 90, and could probably outperform today's artists if she actually chose to.
Yes, exactly. We're gonna do a little twist here, and I don't know if we're moving too quickly with the questions or whatever, but
just a little.
Y'all and these twists.
That's her.
But you're such a source of wisdom and knowledge. We want to try and just glean from you today, okay?
Okay. No
the
problem.
next question I have is something I think we may have touched on just in a conversation with you before. How has God?
Uh-oh. We may be having some.
Did we lose him? Oh, there he is.
Yeah,
Did
it
you
might
hear
have
that
been me. No, I didn't. Can you repeat that? Because I think I got caught in the matrix.
Okay. How has gospel music influenced other genres of music in America? What do you think about that?
It is definitely the foundation of Western modern pop music, because a lot of you got to take it back to maybe the 1800s when, you know, we had former slaves that had a lot of the African rhythms that came over with them, and that combined with what they were learning here evolved into jazz and to blues. And there was one particular musician in the late 1800s by the name of Tommy Dorsey, who is considered the father of modern gospel, who took a lot of those blues chords progressions and put them in the church. And so a lot of the like Precious Lord and a lot of the hymns that our grandparents and our great grandparents grew up on were rooted in blues and in jazz. And as a result of that, a lot of modern music borrowed from that gospel diaspora. An example of that could be Ray Charles. Ray Charles took Ray Charles took a lot of gospel riffs, gospel chord progressions, and put them in pop and R&B records. So basically, there's a case that could be made that gospel music in America is the foundation for popular music.
Okay.
I got something.
Go ahead.
It's incredible how I know how much he had to catch a lot of flack from the church community itself, because they call it because he brought the gospel music sort of mixture into his music into the clubs. And so they considered him in the church, of course, they considered him hypocritical. Right. And also it sort of spanned throughout the years, because I believe the Clark sisters, Twinkie had to go through that when she did You Brought the Sunshine, when she caught a lot of flack from the Kojic community. When the Clark sisters came out with that. And so it sort of seems like it just goes from another generation to another generation, where it's always some kind of controversy about the music itself and how the artists express themselves and write it, and catch a lot of flack from church.
Right.
I think in those particular cases, what winds up happening is people have a tendency to confuse gospel music with ministry.
Right.
Ministry is a whole nother separate animal. Gospel music is a part of the music business, and there is a distinct difference. And I tell a lot of my potential clients, make a distinction and make a choice, because ministry, you don't have to have a marketing budget for ministry. You can go do ministry wherever you choose, but when you make the decision to enter into the music business, that is a whole separate other set of rules and regulations. And a lot of times people don't like those rules and regulations. They don't like that. Right. And not to criticize the church, but we are very slow to move at some points.
It's true.
We're slow to evolve. you know, if it was left up to some people, we would still be singing those same hymns that they don't know were based out of blues and jazz records from the 1800s. We would still be singing those, and so as an artist, there's some things you're just going to have to overcome, and there is definite challenges with that.
And that's a very good point, because I can remember, I'm telling my age, when I was back, when he was maybe 8 or 9, I was in college. And during that time, I remember I went to UNC Greensboro.
Okay.
And they would have like contemporary artists to come through during that time, but all of the contemporary artists were Caucasian. There were not, any Black groups or church people or any kind of community choir, even with churches that were doing any kind of contemporary stuff, not really in the 80s, except for the Clark sisters were some of the ones that were doing something that was more current, ahead of its time. The Winans did some stuff that was ahead of their time.
Andre Crouch.
But it took a while for the Black community to kind of start coming around to music from that perspective.
Yeah, because touring and getting out there, for some people who don't like to change quickly, that's kind of a scary thing. And the lure of being on tour, I don't care who you are, that can be daunting for some people.
Right.
And so it took a while for contemporary gospel acts to get on that college circuit, to get out of the four walls of the church.
Right.
And unfortunately, and we definitely don't have the time to go into this, it's still a battle that's being fought today in 2023.
It's true.
Of acceptance of, where do we belong? Do we belong solely in the church, or do we belong outside with other people? And so, definitely took a while.
Okay. I'm going to touch on. We were reading about the influence of gospel music on R&B, and it stated that Detroit soul from Motown was heavily influenced by gospel music. What do you think about that? Because I remember I searched about Motown.
I agree, because the thing with gospel music, and if you can make a comparison, the thing that good gospel music has that Motown had is that it's simple. It's simple and it's easy to remember, and the tune kind of gets stuck in your head, and that is what makes it more endearing, because it's almost inviting to people. It's a simple kind of music, but just because it's simple doesn't mean it's not well done.
Right.
You know what I mean? It's simplistic and complicated at the same time, in that there is an art to doing it well. And that is where Motown really shined above a lot of the companies at that time, because they did it well. It was simple music that people could remember, and they had a goal, and they were going to get there. And so that is the kind of the thing, to me, is where you can kind of make those comparisons. Also, Motown had a finishing school. They had artist development. They had a way that you couldn't just go into Motown and just sign a contract and now you're singing.
Right.
They had a finishing school. They had etiquette school. It was basically training that they had to take you from being who you are and turn you into a recording artist, and then turn that recording artist into a star. And that process of transformation is closely akin to the church, because the idea is that you go into the church one way and come out another.
Right. That's true. True.
Yeah.
So Berry Gordy, Stan, what do you?
Berry Gordy.
When you hear that name, what comes to mind? Because I know
it's automatically Motor City, Detroit. Motown. He's the heartbeat. He was the founder of it all. It's incredible how, the writers that he had, like Smokey Robinson.
Yeah.
Marvin Gaye. Smokey Robinson and Aretha Franklin were actually best friends I believe at the time the way the documentary was told that he actually visited her at Pastor Franklin's house in Detroit. I think that's how he actually first met her. She was a little girl.
Right.
And I believe that he said that he walked in the house and she was on the piano, playing and singing. And I believe that, from that point on, they developed a relationship, a brotherhood and a sisterhood. But it's incredible how nobody really knows the influences of Smokey Robinson himself. All these people basically came out of church.
Yeah.
And they all grew up in the same neighborhood.
Right.
You talking about, who was it? Some of the people that were a part of Temptations. All these people was like in the same neighborhood.
Right. And they also migrated in the second Great Migration from the Deep South to Detroit for those jobs. So like a lot of the Temptations, particularly David Ruffin, Eddie Kendricks, Paul Williams of the original, I think Otis as well, they all came from Alabama and Mississippi, that part of the country, and migrated to Detroit. And what one thing that people don't really realize, that I have to remind independent artists as well, is Berry Gordy failed a lot before Motown actually took off. Berry Gordy had a jazz record store that went bankrupt. He wanted to be a prize fighter and got knocked out.
Wow.
He did. He went to work. He didn't get up. He worked for Ford Motor Company in Detroit, got fired. But at every point, and this is something I heard someone say, that he used his own disaster for his own good. So at every level, if you are in a store that's bankrupt and you know that something is not selling well, now you know what not to sell. If you are fighting and you're getting knocked out, well, now you know what battles to fight and what battles not to fight. If you're in Ford and you're getting fired, okay, what did I do to get fired? And how do they keep making those cars? The assembly line. I wonder, can I do an assembly line for a record company? So some things to think about. I would encourage anybody that's interested to read Berry Gordy's autobiography. Very, very informative.
Check that out. Yeah.
Wow. Many battles in order to win. You have to go through a lot of battles to win.
Absolutely.
Yeah. And the key is to not give up.
Right.
Right. There's got to be somebody with a yes.
Yeah. And sometimes it's you with the yes.
Yes, that's true.
That's true.
Because keep in mind, Motown was an independent company at first. Nobody was going to give him a deal. Motown was independent.
Right.
He sold them records out of the trunk of somebody's car.
Yeah.
So yeah.
And it's going back also, it's like in full circle now, even with the present artists now. I mean, I was reading up on, I think I seen an interview with Lettucey. She started out, she was selling her product out of her trunk. And somehow one of her projects that somebody bought got in her songs from the CD that she was selling. Somehow the CD got in Chaka Khan's hand. From that point on, Lettucey, the history of through the struggle that she probably had to go through. I mean, including people like Jill Scott, these artists, these present artists, the struggle of it all.
Yeah. Even if we want to take it full circle back to gospel, I mean, Shirley Caesar, when she first started, she sold, records out of her trunk. She was an independent artist. And so a lot of times you just have to know that this is something internal that I'm being led to do. And you're going to get met with a lot of adversity. You're going to get met with the same people that looked at Noah like he was crazy.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's true. That's true.
Yep.
Yep.
Wow.
Did you break this song?
Oh, wow. We got to do a break. It's already. Wow.
Man, it's that quick. All right.
It's that quick, man.
Time
goes by so fast.
Well, So for the blast, for the blast artist of the day,
double duty today.
You're doing a double duty, my friend.
I am doing double duty. We're gonna play my better half, Meek, with "Live and Not Die," and if you listen very, very carefully, you will hear some of Stanley Flake in the background.
Oh, really?
"Live and Not Die." New Day with Stanley and Renee. Blast Music 247. Let's go.
Tell you something about experience. You never know where it's coming from. I gave it a run on my own so many times before and did it wrong without you. But now I know who you are. You give me life abundantly, and being without you, something I won't do. I'm gonna live, I'm gonna be strong, and I'm gonna make it. They said I wouldn't make it, they said I wouldn't be here today. I wouldn't amount to anything, anything, anything. So no matter what people say, gonna love you anyway, and I shall live and not die, die, die. I'm gonna live my life abundantly, and I'll fulfill my purpose, what He has for me. And people may be wondering why my life is blessed. It's because I chose obedience, and He is well pleased.
Quiet storm, y'all. The devil came, he stole and destroyed. Ultimately, tried to kill you, boy. But I'm still here, only by God's grace. Walking in love and still keeping the faith. I ain't gonna let them devils kill me or keep me in bondage, cause I'm freed indeed. When Christ shed his bleed, his blood, I'm alive with him, I bear forth from above. If I had wings like a dove, y'all would see me fly. But I'm rooted and grounded in the word, there's no lie. Abundantly supplied, walking in the light, getting my daily bread like whole wheat and white. Never lose a sight, cause I'm walking by faith. Exercising godliness by running my race. Getting off course is something that I can't afford, because I live to proclaim the works of the Lord.
They said I wouldn't make it, they said I wouldn't be here today. I wouldn't amount to anything, anything, anything. So no matter what people say, gonna love you anyway, and I shall live and not die, die, die.
Love it, love it, love it.
Man.
Yeah. I tell you, that was a fun video to do. Shout out to everybody. Shout out to the rapper Quiet Storm. Shout out to Big Los, Carlos Massey, who directed it, starred in it. Dorian Edwards, Taranza Graves, Nikisha Wrights and her husband, who were videographers. We kind of call that the assembling of the Avengers that day, because we had a lot of fun putting that video together. So shout out to everybody. And if you are an independent artist, stand-up comedian, and even a spoken word artist, you ready to get your art out there, go to blastmusic247.com and fill out a free profile, and let's get your art out there to the community. Blastmusic247.com, changing the industry one artist at a time.
All right. Well, we back for part 2.
Yeah, that first part went quick.
Yeah, I was
know.
like,
I was
unless we want to touch on any other.
well, I mean, you can do it. You can do that.
I was when I got a chance to sit down and do some reading, I always like to look at things, and with the topic about how gospel music has affected or influenced music in America, there was a mention about Little Richard, and how he was an influence with rock and roll, and Aretha Franklin, as you mentioned before, of course, known for art, rhythm and blues. So that how they kind of ushered things in and kind of were forerunners of that. What do you think?
Absolutely, and there were some other things attached to Little Richard in regards to his sexual preference and the way he dressed, the makeup that he wore, the clothes that he wore, and a lot of that, was for shock value. But those are some issues that we've had to deal with in the church for years and years and years,
Right.
and people just don't want to talk about it. And with Aretha Franklin, the thing that people don't really realize or remember about Aretha Franklin was she was like a quadruple threat, because not only was she a powerhouse singer, she was an awesome musician as well. She was an awesome songwriter. She was an awesome arranger. And she got that training in the church. And so the church is responsible for training a lot of us in the skill sets that we have in this business.
Okay. Anything else do you think of, Steve, that you want to add before we ask the final question?
Well, I know that some of the music that some of the artists of the past are, of course, the influences of the artists today. Can you give us any comparison of artists from the past to the present that may have some similarities?
Yeah, and I'm gonna go in a direction that y'all probably didn't expect me to go, but just because I know this. Back in the Baroque period, 1600s, 1700s, composers would write music, and let's use for example like Beethoven would write like a symphony, and maybe Brahms saw the symphony and liked a certain part of it, then decided that I'm gonna take this part of this symphony and I'm gonna put it in my symphony, right?
Right.
That is sampling. That is what artists do today when they take part of somebody else's song and they put it in their song, and now they created a new song. And so that kind of thing has been around. People think that just because of the digital age that sampling only came about because of that. No, artists have been sampling artists forever. Think about Elvis Presley, who is the quote unquote king of rock and roll, although that's debatable. Elvis Presley was a watered down version of the blues singers that they saw in Mississippi.
Right.
And so he sampled, stole, whatever you want to call it, a lot of music from black artists. Big Mama Thornton, from Hound Dog, just to name a few. And so if you go down the line, you have singers and you have songwriters and you have performers who are drawing from the past. You have singers like let me think. I drew a blank immediately. And I'm gonna just speak in general. You have singers now who are trained in the church, that now they sing and they write and they do their own publishing and things of that nature. And so it's always, I'll give you a quote that Quincy Jones said in his documentary that was on Netflix. He said that you got to understand that the musical alphabet is only 7 letters. A, B, C, D, E, F, G.
Yes.
And that's been the musical alphabet since the dawn of mankind. Now, can you imagine the kind of imagination that you would have to create an entire body of music from just 7 letters?
Wow. That's something to think about.
Right. And so at some point you're going to find that things are going to be borrowing from other things. Now, there's a difference between borrowing and just out and out stealing. You know, we could get into that. You know, but yeah, it's definitely the past will always influence the future. Always.
On a business perspective, I was just thinking about, you know, the artists back in the day, 50s and beyond, even past the 50s or before the 50s. They really didn't know anything about copyrights and owning their own ownership of their own music.
Right.
You know, because basically, you know, they just went for the record companies back then, like
RCA and
and they didn't actually. They knew these artists had the gift and the artistry of music, and basically just used them and took their rights. I wonder how it would have been if somebody would have educated them back then, where they could have been by now, even from you know, financially stability, from, you know, to their money being passed on to generations of their own. You know, if they would have been educated back then. But do you think they would have accepted it, even if somebody said, hey, you might need to try to do copyrights? Or they probably would have been somewhat maybe not interested because they felt that it wasn't important.
Right. And you got to understand, and you know, not that I'm going to call people ignorant, but there are sometimes you get put in situations where you don't see the big picture. You only see what's in front of you.
Right.
And so a lot of times, you know, artists back in the day would be approached and say, hey, you come sing this song, I'm gonna give you $100. Well, you know, $100 in the 40s and the 50s, that's pretty good. Yeah, you know what I mean? That's a pretty good little chunk of change right there. But, you know, you just saw the immediate $100. You didn't see that song or that work could generate money for generations.
It's
and
true.
Unfortunately, because we a lot of our people were conditioned for survival, we didn't really care. We didn't really see that. We just cared about today.
Right.
And then there's an unfortunate fact that a lot of artists like that wound up dying broke. You know.
Yeah. I was looking outside the movie. Was it Cadillac?
Cadillac Records.
You know,
Yes, they would have been
when they would
Etta
literally
James.
pay them off with cars.
Yeah.
Instead of
What was owed?
what was really due to them money wise, and you know, they didn't even realize that they, you know about the business perspective, but they felt that they made it because they had a car.
Absolutely, and I mean, because that was the status symbol. You know, a Cadillac. I remember. Matter of fact, I just saw like a short YouTube reel yesterday, where it was a documentary on how to sell products to the Negro, and it was back in like the 60s. And one of the things that they said is that if you're going to sell products to the Negro, you got to understand that, number one, they're about name brands, and number two, they're about recognition. And a lot of times people use that to their advantage to pay off black artists and say, you know, unfortunately Motown did the same thing to some degree.
Right.
Instead of paying me what you owe me, you're going to give me this Cadillac.
Wow.
You know, and a lot of times that was pretty much it. And we've seen incidents of that even in the modern era. If you go back and look at TLC, you know, Left Eye Chili and T-Boz. If you go back and look at their Behind the Music episode on VH1, when they were dealing with LaFace Records, they got paid off in I think it was RAV4s, little Jeeps or whatever, instead of the money that they were owed. And you know, here they are, they got a brand new Jeep with no house to buy, and they're still living at home. And, and that's what happens when you're ignorant of the business. So yeah.
So I have a question also, D. Like what we're going through today, I'm noticing some of the artists now are selling their catalogs.
Yes.
You got to look. Justin Bieber was one of them, and several other artists. And can you tell me the reason why do you why they doing that? I mean, is it because of the economy itself, or
it because today's record industry is a marathon. It's a long marathon. The days of the 70s and the 80s where somebody could sell 10, 15 million records and go buy a mansion, those days are kind of over for now. Because people don't buy records anymore. People don't really care about music ownership. They care more about music access. So, I could care less about somebody's album collection right now, especially when I have Spotify on my phone and I have access to any music on planet Earth at the drop of a hat. And so, and if you are an incredibly successful artist, you can use that as leverage to say, hey, instead of me waiting, or instead of my grandkids waiting for this to accrue 200 million, go ahead and pay me now, and then you can wait and get whatever residuals to your grandchildren. And so that is the craze now, is just they're just profiting on it now because, like I said, sales are not what it used to be. And you have to find different ways, and not just the major artists, but independent artists. You got to find different ways to make money, whether it's merchandising, whether it's sync licensing, whether it's actual physical sales, doing shows, whatever the case may be. You got to find ways of continuing those revenue streams so you can continue to make money. But while those libraries have value, a lot of those artists have decided to capitalize on it.
I noticed one particular artist that I think that was ahead of the game when it came down to that, and that was Michael Jackson. When I believe he bought the catalogs from the Beatles. Is that correct?
That is correct. And unfortunately, go ahead. I'm sorry. It's sort of like, it was almost like a timing method. When he did that, it became very lucrative. Of course, it seemed like Michael was very smart when it came down to the business perspective of the industry. When he bought the Beatles catalog, I'm like, wow, who would have thought? The caveat to that, if you go and you look at the story and read the history of it, Michael Jackson and Paul McCartney, if you remember in the early 80s, they were working on each other's albums. Paul McCartney had a song on Thriller, The Girl Is Mine, and Michael had a song with Paul on his project, Say, Say, Say. And so the story goes, they were having dinner one night, and Paul McCartney had suggested that Michael go into music publishing, and that it was very lucrative for him to go into music publishing because that's where the money was. What Paul did not know was that Thriller was about to be released, and that there was going to be this tidal wave of money that Michael was going to have, and he was going to have leverage in the industry, to wherein he went and bought. He went and invested in publishing. He went and bought the Beatles stuff and everybody else's. Wow. And so by the time he bought that, and then there was some other acquisitions, so that by the time of the late 80s, I want to say he owned close to 300-400 artists publishing rights, along with a building, a recording studio, a lot of stuff. And for those people that I've researched that knew Michael best, he was very, very business savvy. He couldn't, very, very business savvy. So, and that's just one example of that publishing of how you can capitalize on stuff. And the main thing that you have to do these days, you have to try to be 5 years ahead of the curve. Yes. And so in order to do that, you have to do your research, go to these conferences, always be a student, no matter what, and find what that next thing that's coming, and then try to figure out how can I capitalize on that.
Yeah, sure.
The last question that we want to ask you ties into a lot of what you guys have been talking about. With all of the different genres of music and current changes with music, what do you think the future of music will look like?
It's funny because, history tends to repeat itself. And so you're seeing now a growing trend of people going back to albums.
Yeah.
People, you're seeing vinyl making a comeback. You're seeing CDs that they thought were dead, but they're making a slight comeback. And so you're going to find that there are going to be certain trends that people thought were dead that are going to come back. Now, this whole thing with people and access to music, that's probably not going to go away, but there will be better pay models for independent musicians in the future as companies like Spotify and Apple Music and Deezer, YouTube, Tidal, as these companies start getting more competition, the pays are going to start going up. So those are some things that I see coming down the pike. I also see artists that if you have the leverage, you can do your own streaming platform and bring your fans to your own page. But you got to have the leverage for that. So you just never know. And then there's so many ways of delivering music these days. You just got to be on the lookout. I saw did you know that Sony is coming out with a new Walkman?
No, didn't know that.
Yeah, it's going to be a digital Walkman that you can stream Pandora and all this other stuff.
Oh my gosh.
That's coming back. And so that to me is an example of history repeating itself, but it's just going to be a little different, So.
Okay, neat. That is neat.
Wow. This has been like really seriously. It felt like a really good class. Very informative. This is what I was telling people. I gave a introduction of this particular part 2 and you. And I told them to really, you probably want to really, really keen in and, come into the podcast because it's going to be very informative. I've learned so much in this hour alone. So, I mean, and it is a constant change, and you have to literally go with the change. Either, like you said, be 5 years or so or beyond to catch it before it gets here. But man,
I would recommend, because I'm a big reader when it comes to stuff that I really want to learn about. There's a book that came out a few years ago called Who Moved the Cheese?
Oh, I love that.
Yeah, you read that book? I love that book. And that book applies to everything, especially if you're an independent artist, especially if you're an entrepreneur, is you have to go where the food is at. You can't just be the type of artist that says, you know what, I just want to make music. I'm going to make a tape. I'm going to put it in somebody's hands and they're going to make me a star. That is not how that works. That is not how it's going to work. Well, I'm going to put it in the hands of a recording artist and they're going to make me a star. That's not how it works either. Because the average recording artist has no power. So it's really all about getting your mindset behind, I need to go where the cheese is at. I need to go where the money is. How am I going to fund this? How am I going to pay for this? And there's definitely going to be some sacrifice along the way, but it boils down to how bad do you want it?
Wow.
Yep.
Well, we're going to end this great informative podcast, and we want to thank you, DRay, brother.
Thank you
for coming in.
Thank you.
And giving us some very, very educational tools that we really need. I feel like we just did a book on music history, on music theory, and I mean it's a beautiful thing. This
workshop.
And this is something that's really needed for the upcoming artists and the artists that want to be artists. These are the platforms that you need to go to. These are the classes that you need to attend. You need to be informed about the business more than the music itself, because without the business, really, your foundation is gone. And this has been a platform that I want to talk about for the longest, and to have you on board to inform us. We give you great thank you, appreciation, man, for your time. And really, I hope that we can get more into depth of this music theory and the business of it, which we probably will. You know, I think it needs to be told. I think it needs to be said.
Absolutely.
To inform and to educate.
We probably would need a panel for that.
We're going to have to get a
We'll
panel.
have to organize something.
You know, maybe next go round.
Well,
what do you think?
Well, you know, because I am the host of the Liftoff, that is something that we definitely can put together. And, you know, it's something that Blast, the leadership, we've talked about doing a virtual conference to talk about the music industry and to talk about the ins and the outs of it. And that is something that is definitely, you know, you talked about what's going to happen in the future. NFTs, if people are not familiar with the non-fungible tokens, is the new thing now, where the art exists in a digital realm, and instead of, you know, buying things traditionally, I do not want to go into NFTs right now because that's a whole nother separate conversation. But you're talking about art that exists only in the digital realm, that you have to have certain devices or certain apparatuses to see it, to hear it, whatever.
Wow.
And that is where we're kind of moving into virtual reality, into digital realms.
Okay.
And, you know, give you an example. Years ago, 20, 30 years ago, they talked about going into law and being an entertainment attorney or being an intellectual property attorney to deal with people and copyrights. Now the projection is you need to have computer programmers and computer people who have legal degrees, because because now these recording contracts are going to be digital, so that you have like a record that exists in the digital world, and embedded in that music will be a digital contract that you can only use in certain places. You know what I mean? That's kind of where it's going, you know. And so it's always good to be you know, to remain a student and to learn and to figure out where you fit in. Somebody told me one time that, you know, as an independent artist, you're either going to have a lot of time and no money, or a lot of money and no time. You can't have both. You know.
Wow.
And so you got to figure it out. You got to figure out what's the best course and the best path. You know.
Okay.
Wow. Well, we thank you for your time today and to give us so much information that is really, really needed. And hopefully, like I said, you know, like you were saying, we'll do this in the near future with a panel, which would be fantastic.
Absolutely.
That would be great.
Woo!
Absolutely.
You know,
and do some concerts. And do some concerts too.
Yeah. So the future looks very bright for Blast Radio 247. So you guys, please stay tuned, be informed, keep your eyes, keep your ears open. You know, brand new ideas, concepts, everything that's coming down the pike. DRay, we thank you, brother, man, for your time.
Appreciate you.
And before we go, make sure that if you're listening, follow, like, and subscribe Blast Music 247 on all media platforms, YouTube, Facebook, Twitter, Instagram. Find Stanley Flake and Safar TV, Safar Music. Like, follow, subscribe, share. Soul Resurrection Music, Soul Res Music on YouTube. We're out here. And a lot of times when independent artists are asking for support, they're not necessarily asking for money right away, because you know, a like, a subscribe, a comment, all of that stuff is free and it just requires a little bit of effort.
That's
so
good.
Seek us out. We got some good music out here and some good things happening.
Amen.
All right. Great.
Hey, thanks again, brother. We're going to call it a night. Guys, we'll see you next Sunday. Stay in tune. This is A New Day with Stanley Renee and DRay.
Have a great week, everybody.
You're a poet, and we didn't know it. Y'all have a good evening.